Most people will starve to death while holding the seeds in their hands. Their gardens will die not from drought, but from the wrong choice of crops. Annual plants quietly destroy the food system year after year. But there are plants that come back every spring without permission. Imagine 10 years without fertilizers, fuel, and seeds from stores. Only one farming system will survive under such conditions. These crops already exist, but almost no one grows them. Survival depends on landing them before panic and chaos sets in. Once the collapse becomes obvious, it will be too late to change anything. Here are 10 plants that will nourish you for decades. When the collapse extends beyond one season, when it is not just a bad year but a decade of instability, only those people who have planted perennials will continue to eat. Annual crops require replanting every spring, wasting a lot of time and energy that could be directed elsewhere. Perennials come back year after year, require almost zero maintenance, and continue to provide food even when seeds, fertilizer, or fuel cannot be obtained. Unfortunately, most survival gardeners are still stuck growing tomatoes and beans like it's a weekend hobby. Perennials provide survival infrastructure. You plant them once and they feed you for 20 years without reseeding, plowing, or relying on supply chains. If you are watching this video, you already know that something is going wrong in our world. Subscribe now because by the time most people realize that annual vegetable gardens fail under long-term stress, you'll already have a food forest. These 10 perennial crops operate in climate zones 3 through 7, covering much of North America and other regions. They are selected according to 3 ironclad criteria: survive complete neglect, produce serious calories or nutrients, and repair themselves without a single move on your part. In the 1930s, dust storms in the United States showed how annual systems collapse under prolonged stress. Climate zones 3 through 7 cover more than 60% of North America's agricultural land. This is an area from southern Canada to the central United States where winter temperatures drop to -34 degrees Celsius. Each plant on the list has stood the test of time under extreme conditions. Mongolian shepherds, Victorian gardeners, and Native American tribes have used these crops for survival for centuries. Modern science has confirmed their nutritional value and resistance to climate change. Let's start with number 10, which most people have never heard of, but which can feed a family for 20 years straight. Siberian pea bush will be your hedge that produces protein and restores soil at the same time. Number 10. Siberian pea bush, nitrogen-fixing survival hedge. Most people have never heard of Caragana tree, but in the harsh climates of Siberia, Mongolia, and northern Canada, this shrub fed people and livestock through winters that would kill most garden crops. It is not decorative, but functional, and in long-term ruin, only functionality matters. Siberian pea bush is a nitrogen-fixing legume, which means it can extract nitrogen from the air and deposit it into the soil through its roots. In a scenario where you can't buy fertilizer and the soil has been depleted by years of farming, this plant restores the soil while feeding you. The shrub grows from 2.5 to 4 meters in height and tolerates temperatures down to -40 degrees Celsius. You plant it once as a hedge or hedge, and it produces edible pea-like seeds every year for 50 years or more. The seeds have a slightly nutty flavor, similar to lentils, and are high in protein. Collect seeds in late summer when the pods are full and beginning to dry out. Peel them, cook them like any dried legume, or grind them into flour for baking bread. One mature shrub produces several kilograms of seeds per year without any care. Plant a hedge of 10 shrubs for a constant source of protein that never requires replanting. Young shoots and leaves are edible in the spring, and livestock, chickens, goats, and rabbits will graze the foliage year-round. It's a multifunctional survival crop that feeds you, feeds the animals, and improves the soil all at the same time. In long-term collapse, soil fertility becomes the limiting factor for any farming. The Siberian pea bush solves this problem while providing food. It is hardy, productive, and once established it cannot be killed, even if you try on purpose. The next plant is even more versatile and produces 3 different vegetables from one root. Number 9. Sea kale, a perennial that no one knows but tastes like 3 different vegetables. Sea kale, or sea crab, is a coastal European plant that has fed people for centuries, but is largely unknown in North America. This is a mistake, because sea kale is one of the most versatile, easy-to-grow perennial vegetables you can grow. Each part of this plant is edible at different times of the year, making it an ingenious survival solution. In early spring, the young shoots taste like asparagus, tender, soft, and tasty. As the plant matures, the leaves become cabbage-like and produce dense, nutrient-rich green vegetables. In late spring, the flower buds taste like broccoli and can be harvested before they open. You get 3 harvests from one plant, and that plant comes back every year for 10 to 15 years without replanting. Sea kale is cold-hardy up to zone 4, tolerates poor sandy or rocky soil, and actually prefers neglect of care. Excessive watering kills seaweed. Rich soil makes it weak. It wants to be forgotten on a sunny slope or in a neglected corner of your property and will produce food every spring like clockwork. Planting is simple. Start from root cuttings or rhizomes in well-drained soil in full sun. Mulch lightly, then forget about the plant the first year and do not harvest, allowing the plant to become established. From the second year, begin collecting shoots in the spring, bleaching them under a bucket or mound of soil for sweeter, more tender growth. Seed saving is automatic. Allow some flower stalks to ripen, collect the seeds and plant them, or simply allow the plant to self-sow and transplant volunteers to new locations. In 1699, English horticulturist John Evelyn documented seaweed as a luxury vegetable of the Victorian era. Why it's on the list? Sea kale produces multiple harvests from a single plant, thrives in terrible conditions, and requires little to no care. The following plant is superior to potatoes in yield and does not require digging every year. Number 8. Earthen pear, a perennial potato that outperforms everything else in terms of yield. If you've ever grown potatoes, you know that they are a labor-intensive crop with digging, hilling, and replanting every year. The earthen pear, also called Jerusalem artichoke, produces similarly high-calorie tubers but is perennial, requires zero maintenance, and produces so aggressively that the only problem will be controlling its spread. One tuber of Jerusalem artichoke planted in the spring turns into 5 to 10 kilograms of tubers by autumn. These tubers stay in the ground all winter, meaning you can dig them up fresh as needed, even through the snow. The earth becomes your storage without a cellar. Jerusalem artichokes are native to North America, so they are adapted to harsh environments and can tolerate poor soil, drought, shade, and complete neglect. Plant them once, and they will spread into a permanent food source that produces more every year. In fact, the biggest challenge is preventing these plants from taking over the entire area. The tubers have a slightly sweet and nutty flavor, like a cross between a potato and a water chestnut. Roast them, mash them, cut them raw into salads, or ferment them for long-term storage. They're rich in inulin, a prebiotic fiber that's great for gut health but can cause gas if you eat too much at once. Start with small portions and allow your body to adapt gradually. Growing is effortless. Plant the tubers in the spring to a depth of 10 to 15 centimeters, 30 centimeters apart. They grow from 1.5 to 3 meters in height, producing bright yellow sunflower-like flowers in late summer. In the fall, after the first frost kills the tops, dig up the tubers as needed. Leave a few tubers in the ground, and they will grow next year without your intervention. Why on the list? Jerusalem artichokes are the ultimate plant-and-forget crop for calories. Once rooted, they produce forever with zero resource waste. Number 7. Asparagus, a spring survival crop that produces 20 years. Asparagus is one of those crops that most people consider too fancy or difficult for a survival garden, but this is wrong. Asparagus is one of the most low-maintenance, high-yielding perennial vegetables you can plant. Once established, it produces fresh food every spring for 2 decades or more without replanting. Asparagus appears in early spring, often before the last frost when nothing else in the garden is ready to be harvested. This is the first fresh vegetable of the season, rich in vitamins A, C, K, and folic acid. In a long-term crisis where fresh food is rare and the body is depleted of months of stored supplies, this early spring nutrition is critical to health. One established bed of asparagus measuring 3 by 1.5 meters produces 5 to 9 kilograms of shoots per year. These are 6 to 8 weeks of daily harvests starting in April or May and require little to no work after mulching with compost. Planting requires patience because asparagus takes 2 to 3 years to become fully established. You don't harvest the first or second year, but once mature, it produces 15 to 25 years in a row. You plant it once and your grandchildren will still eat from it. Dig a trench 15 to 20 centimeters deep and 30 centimeters wide for proper planting. Place the rhizomes at the bottom of the trench at a distance of 30 to 45 centimeters from each other. Fill the trench with 2 inches of soil and gradually fill the trench over the course of the season as the plants grow. Mulch heavily with straw or leaves each fall to suppress weeds and nourish the soil. Harvesting is simple. In the spring, when the shoots appear and reach 15 to 20 centimeters in height, cut them off at ground level. Harvest daily for 6 to 8 weeks, then stop and allow the remaining shoots to grow into tall, feathery foliage. This foliage feeds the roots for next year's harvest. Number 6. Rhubarb, an indestructible perennial that works as mulch. Rhubarb is one of the crops that people grow for pies and desserts, but in a survival scenario, it means much more to long-term food security. This hardy, productive perennial plant that thrives in cold climates produces vitamin-rich stems for decades, and its massive leaves create a natural mulch. Rhubarb is cold-hardy to zone 3, tolerates poor soil, and once established produces 2 to 5 kilograms of stems per plant each year. The stems are rich in vitamin K, calcium, and antioxidants, and store well frozen, canned, or dried. But here's what most people miss. Giant rhubarb leaves contain oxalic acid and are not edible. However, they are biodegradable mulch machines that quickly decompose around other plants. In a long-term scenario where it is not possible to purchase mulch or compost, rhubarb provides both food and soil fertility at the same time. Growing rhubarb is effortless. Plant the rhizomes in early spring in a sunny or partially shaded location with decent drainage. Place them at a distance of 90 to 120 centimeters from each other and mulch the base with compost or straw. Then forget about their existence, because rhubarb doesn't need fertilizer, much water, and doesn't care if you forget about it. In the second year after planting, you can begin harvesting by grabbing the stem at the base and twisting it. Never cut with a knife, as this may introduce disease into the plant. Harvest only a third of the stems at a time, leaving the rest to feed the plant and its root system. Saving seeds is not necessary because rhubarb reproduces by dividing the rhizome. Every 5 to 7 years, dig up the rhizome in early spring, divide it into sections with a sharp knife, and replant. One plant becomes 5 without buying new ones. The next plant is the smallest on the list, but with the greatest impact on taste and immunity. Number 5. Chives, the smallest perennial with the biggest impact on survival. Chives are an herb that everyone grows in a pot on the windowsill and mostly ignores, but in the survival garden, it is a resilient perennial bulbous plant. It comes back every year, requires zero maintenance, and provides flavor, nutrition, and immune-supporting compounds when food variety disappears. When the diet becomes a monotony of potatoes, beans, and squash, taste matters for more than just morale. Eating the same tasteless food every day leads to appetite fatigue, and people stop eating enough to stay healthy. Chives add an onion-like flavor to everything, making survival foods more palatable and supporting normal nutrition. But chives are about more than just taste, because onion plants contain sulfur compounds, antioxidants, and immune system-boosting properties. In a long-term scenario where medical care is limited and you are exposed to stress and potential illness, these compounds are critical. Chives are cold-resistant up to the 3rd zone, grow in sun or partial shade, tolerate poor soil, and slowly spread into dense clumps. One plant becomes a permanent site that produces edible leaves and flowers from spring through fall. Growing is effortless. Plant divisions or seeds 15 centimeters apart in spring. Water occasionally in the first season, after which they take care of themselves without any help. Harvest by cutting off the leaves with scissors, but never pull the plant up by the roots. They regrow within weeks, providing a continuous harvest throughout the growing season. Propagation is simple. Every 3 to 4 years, dig up the clump in early spring, divide it into smaller sections and replant. One plot becomes 5 plots without purchasing new plants. Why on the list? Chives are small, but essential for maintaining a varied diet, immunity, and desire to eat. In a long-term collapse, cultures that support nutrition, not just survival, matter most. Number 4. Perennial kale. A rare year-round source of green vegetables that never needs replanting. Most people think of cabbage as an annual crop. Plant the seeds every spring, harvest during the season. Then the plant goes to seed and dies. But tree kale and some varieties of perennial kale are fundamentally different. They are woody, shrub-like plants that produce edible leaves year-round, even through mild winters. They continue to produce for 5 to 10 years without replanting, making them invaluable for long-term survival. Leafy green vegetables are critical for vitamins A, C, K, calcium, and iron, nutrients that quickly disappear in a crash when fresh food becomes scarce. Annual greens are seasonal, but perennial kale is persistent, providing nutrition when nothing else grows. Tree-like kale grows from 120 to 240 centimeters in height, tolerates heat, cold up to the 7th or 8th zone, and some varieties lower, and poor soil. You plant cuttings, not seeds, and they root easily without special conditions. One plant produces several kilograms of leaves per year, and you can harvest continuously without killing the plant. The leaves taste like regular cabbage, slightly bitter, earthy, and nourishing to the body. Use them raw in salads when young, or cook them in soups and stir-fries when ripe. Growing is simple. Take a cutting 15 to 20 centimeters long from a healthy plant. Remove the lower leaves and stick it into moist soil. It takes root in 2 to 3 weeks without additional effort. Place plants 90 to 120 centimeters apart in full sun or partial shade and mulch around the base. Harvest the outer leaves regularly to encourage new growth in the central part of the plant. Propagation is effortless. Just take more cuttings from the mother plant. One plant becomes an unlimited number of plants to expand the area. Number 3. Pigweed, a cold-hardy perennial green vegetable that outperforms spinach in production. All-leaf pigweed, or Good King Henry, is a European perennial that has fed people since medieval times but is almost unknown in modern gardens. This is a mistake because whole-leaf pigweed is a substitute for spinach, which is more productive, more cold-resistant, and does not go to seed in the summer heat like annual spinach. Annual spinach grows quickly, but bolts when temperatures rise or days lengthen. You get 4 to 6 weeks of harvest, then it's over until the next year. All-leaved pigweed produces edible leaves from early spring to late fall without bolting, producing a 6-month continuous harvest. The leaves taste similar to spinach, are soft, slightly earthy, and are rich in vitamins A, C, calcium, and iron. Use them raw when young or cook them like spinach when ripe. Young shoots can be bleached in the spring and eaten like asparagus for variety in the diet. All-leaved pigweed is cold-resistant up to the 3rd zone, tolerates partial shade, and grows in poor soil without additional fertilizers. It is a plant-and-forget crop that produces within 5 to 10 years of establishment. Planting is simple. Start with seeds or root divisions in the spring, placing them 30 centimeters apart. Mulch lightly, water occasionally in the first season, after which the plant takes care of itself. Harvest by plucking the outer leaves regularly, and the plant continues to produce new growth from the center. In late autumn, cut the plant down to ground level, mulch, and it will appear again in the spring. In monastic gardens of the Middle Ages, pigweed was the main leaf vegetable until the advent of industrial agriculture. Number 2. The Egyptian walking onion, a self-spreading onion that never stops growing. They're one of the strangest, most exciting perennial crops you can grow, and once planted, you'll never need to buy seeds or bulbs again. Egyptian walking onions, also called tree onions, are a perennial bulbous plant that produces edible greens and small bulbs. He literally walks around the garden replanting himself without your participation. Here's how it works. The plant grows like a regular onion, producing green stems that can be harvested and eaten like green onions. But instead of flowering, it produces a cluster of tiny bulbils at the top of the stem. These bulbs become heavy. The stem bends and touches the ground. The bulbs take root and grow into new plants. The onion walks around the site, creating new plants automatically. The survival benefit is obvious. You plant once and have a permanent, self-renewing onion patch forever. The greens are edible year-round in mild climates, and the bulbs can be harvested and used like shallots. Egyptian walking onion is cold-hardy to zone 3, tolerates poor soil, and grows in sun or partial shade. Drought, neglect, and freezing temperatures do not stop its production. Planting is simple. Buy bulbs or small plants and plant them 10 centimeters deep, 15 centimeters apart. Water in the first season, after which they take care of themselves completely. Harvest the greens by cutting them with scissors and they will grow back like chives within weeks. Harvest the bulbs in late summer when they are firm and ripe for culinary use. Eat some, replant others, and the cycle continues indefinitely without your input. Why on the list? Egyptian walking onion represents the ultimate low-maintenance crop that propagates itself and requires zero replanting. In a disrupted scenario, where seed availability becomes uncertain, crops that reproduce themselves are invaluable for long-term survival. Number 1. American groundnuts, a native, perennial source of protein that almost no one knows about. This is a crop that should be in every survival garden, but almost no one grows it today. American groundnut, or Apios americana, is a native North American perennial climbing plant that produces edible tubers that are high in protein and starch. It fixes nitrogen into the soil during growth, creating the perfect combination of calories, protein, and soil fertility in one plant. Groundnut tubers contain 15 to 17% protein by dry weight, which is higher than potatoes, sweet potatoes, or any other root crop. In a long-term bust where meat is rare and beans are the only source of protein, groundnuts offer another option. The tubers have a nutty and slightly sweet flavor, like a cross between a potato and a bean for a unique flavor profile. Boil them, fry them, mash them, or chop them into stews for a variety of culinary uses. They are high in calories, rich in nutrients, and are stored in the ground all winter, like Jerusalem artichokes, using the ground as natural storage. The groundnut is a native plant, adapted to the North American climate through centuries of natural selection. It is cold-hardy to zone 3, grows in sun to partial shade, and thrives in moist soil near streams, ponds, or low-lying areas. It is a nitrogen-fixing legume that improves the soil during food production, making the land more fertile each year. The plant is a perennial vine that grows from 1.5 to 3 meters in height, producing fragrant purple-brown flowers in summer. It spreads slowly by underground tubers, forming a permanent patch that produces more each year without additional effort. Planting is simple. Buy tubers or dig up wild plants with permission and replant them on the site. Plant the tubers 7 centimeters deep and 30 centimeters apart near a trellis, fence, or support structure. Mulch lightly and water regularly for the first season, after which they are self-sufficient. Harvest the tubers in late fall or early spring by carefully digging around the base of the plant. Leave some tubers in the ground to regrow, and one small tuber becomes a kilogram of food in a year. Why number 1? The American groundnut is the most underrated perennial crop for long-term survival, providing protein, calories, nitrogen fixation, and is native, adapted to survive without you. 10 crops, all for decades to come, without annual replanting, dependency on seeds or fertilizer supply chains, just a permanent food infrastructure that continues to produce even when everything else in the system fails. Here's your reality check. Perennials take time to establish, and if you wait until failure is obvious, you're already too late to save. The time to plant is now, while you can still get rhizomes, cuttings, and tubers from nurseries. Because in 3 years, when the seed companies are sold out and the nurseries are empty, you will have a harvest while everyone else is starving. In 1920, the pandemic exposed the real fragility of the seed supply, increasing the urgency of preparation. Which perennial crop do you plant first? Leave a comment below and share your plan. And if you're serious about long-term food security, subscribe because this channel is about building systems that last forever. It is not about reacting when it is too late to change anything in a collapsing world.